So we've covered a lot of different rendering systems on this channel, and we've done a lot of videos on rendering. And with so many different rendering systems on a go, I want to ask the question today, what is the best rendering system to use at the moment? So we're going to start at the beginning, and we're going to probably go with what is considered the most used rendering system in the UK, that is, for example, and it's just standard sand cement render. This is probably the simplest and cheapest go-to option to use in terms of rendering. All you need to do is mix sand with a bit of cement. Now the main problem is getting the mixes right. Now this is something that can cause major issues when you're using this, because actually getting it wrong can be fatal, in the sense that you can actually crack and get bad catastrophic results if you get this wrong. So the mix is probably the most important part when you are rendering with just standard sand cement. Now let's go through the pros first. One, it's very cheap, it's easy to come by, easy to source, and like I said, it's probably the most commonly used option here at this moment in time. But saying that, there are a lot of cons. It's not very flexible, it's not very good with movement, it tends to crack, and applying it can be quite tricky sometimes. If you're not getting the right mix, if you're not using the right additives, it just doesn't stick to anything really. So for me, sand cement is an option that I'm actually pulling away from, and I have to say that it's probably the worst option for me in terms of the rendering systems at this moment in time. Now another major flaw with standard sand cement is that it doesn't let any buildings breathe. Sand cement started to be used commonly after the World War because it was a faster way to get houses rendered, finished up. But the problem was sand cement doesn't allow any buildings to breathe, and a lot of the older buildings, which were used with lime mortar, need to allow breathability. So sand cement can not only be hard to use, but it can be also very, very detrimental to buildings, leading to damp, and it can trap moisture between the brickwork. So the next rendering system we're going to mention here is the age-tested lime plaster. Now, lime rendering is an amazing source of, is an amazing material. It's probably the most breathable in all the materials you use, and it's completely natural. And using it is actually a beautiful product. I find it's a lot nicer than sand cement when you are using lime plaster. And again, like we said, it allows your buildings to breathe, and which is essential on certain builds if you've got lime construction, especially if you use stone buildings. So lime plastering rendering is, in my opinion, a superior product, and it's a lot nicer and better results to use. Now the problem is with lime, it can be very expensive. You have to use quite a lot of it to get the thickness required. Not only that, it takes a hell of a lot more time than say a standard sand cement finish. Which means more time, more money for the customer, and generally it can lead to bigger issues in the fact that it needs to be controlled. You need to have a lot of moisture, you need to pay a lot of attention to how you're wrapping it. If you're rendering it on the outside, it needs to cover it with hessian afterwards. It can't be exposed to too much sunlight, so you do have to be very careful with lime, and it's actually probably one of the hardest systems to master if you are going to be doing this on a daily basis. Now this is probably going to lead nicely to a new modern kind of era. So what we've got now, we've got the main problem with sand cement, it's not breathing. It's very cheap to use and very fast, but it doesn't breathe. Lime does breathe heavily, but it's quite expensive and takes a long time. Now these modern renders out there now, so you can, for example, get a bagged pre-made render which emulates sand cement, but it's got breathable properties with it. And the next rendering system I'm going to talk about is a bagged render called OCR. This stands for one coat render, but it's basically a pre-mixed product, and the main thing about it is it does allow breathability. Now, in my opinion, it's never going to be as breathable as, say, a lime render, but it does have breathable properties in it. So you've got the best of both worlds in the fact that it's a pre-mixed product, it comes bagged, all you have to do is add water to it, mix it wherever you need to, and in terms of product use, it is an unbelievable, far superior product. It's stickier than sand cement, it's easier to apply, it's really nice to rule off, and the fact that when you're using it you're getting breathable properties is just a bonus, but everything else afterwards is an absolute gem. It's nicer to float, sponge, and it's a lot more forgiving. There's a lot more flexibility in these bag renders. And in terms of After Effects, I've not seen many cracking with, say, a render like OCR. And that's because they've got the polymers added to it. It's a specific mix, and you're not guessing. With sand cement, there's no warranty, there's no guarantee. If you mix up and start rendering a house, you've got 5 different elements. You're using different sand, different cement, different primers, different additives. What you need to make sure is that your mix is correct, whereas with these bag renders, there's no guessing. You just pour it into the water, mix it up, and on it goes onto the wall. The main thing is just applying it. It's sticky, and it doesn't seem to sag. It can hold its own weight massively, which means you can do 2 coats in one day. You get a scratch coat, and you can be an hour later, you can be applying your second coat if the conditions are right. This is what the joys are of using bag renders. It's a lot faster, and they're just generally geared up for better results in terms of flexibility and all-round finish. Now that's OCR. You can apply 1 coat, 2 coats all in one day, or you can do 1 coat, second coat the next day. It's very flexible to use, and that is the joys of modern renders. Now, that is the base coat. This is what you use on brickwork. Now, if you want to be doing timber frame, the best system you should be using is a silicone rendering system. So this is basically where you've got a timber frame and using, say, cement board, which is applied on top of the timber, and that's your base. Now, silicone render, the reason it's so effective on timber frame is because it's flexible. It allows for a lot of movement. Because it's silicone based, if there is any movement in the timber, the silicone render is going to take it, and it's going to allow for that movement with it. You can't use sand cement, in my opinion, or these bag renders with this cement board. I think the only option is literally this silicone render that we're looking at here. This is called Baumit, and we've got a star contact base coat, and the top coat is called silicone top. Silicone system, silicone rendering, in my opinion, is the most superior rendering system we come across. And I make a lot of videos and they say best rendering system and whatnot, but I genuinely believe this is the best. But now, here's the problem with it. It's actually very expensive as a system to do. Silicone render is probably the dearest system you can buy. So say if we're working on brickwork, for example, you can use OCR, you still got to do your 15mm thickness, and then you can use your silicone top coat on top. So not only are you paying for the OCR and the sand cement, but you then also got to pay separately for the silicone top. But the pros are, it's extremely flexible, it's easy to apply, and the finishing system for this is very easy. You literally apply it in, like, say, 1 meter panels, and all you do is float it up with a different float. It's like a thinner float, but you float it, it leaves like a textured finish. It's a lot easier than, say, if you're finishing with just these bag renders, sand, cement, lime. It's a lot easier product to use, it's a lot more forgiving, and the colour is in the product itself, which for me, and even though it's more expensive, generally it's a lot less work. You haven't got to go back and think about painting. The finish is a lot faster. So even though it is a more expensive system, in my opinion, it's a lot more worth it, because you've got the assurance not only your base coat is strong, but when you use this silicone on top, you've got the flexibility, so if there is any movement, it's going to take it. So with that in mind, this video coming up here on the left, I'm going to show you the full guide on how to use this silicone rendering system. Now bear in mind, this is my best rendering system, and if you are interested in learning a new system for rendering which is guaranteed results, then click that video there, because that will show you everything you need to know on how to start using this today. And click the other thing on the right to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers.